Hi kids. The story tonight is Joseph's brothers learn the truth. We're continuing the story of Joseph, where he went from being a slave, where his brothers sold him into Egypt because they were jealous of him, and then he spent time in prison after he was a slave, and then God gave Joseph the power to have dreams and be able to tell what those dreams meant, and he was able to help Pharaoh with the dreams that were constantly on Pharaoh's mind that he couldn't stop thinking about. So Pharaoh made Joseph second in charge under him over all of Egypt. So there was nobody greater in Egypt over Joseph than Pharaoh the king. So remember, the brothers just thought he was sold into slavery. They don't know he's here and he's in so much power. The Bible verse that goes with it tonight is in the first book of the Bible, Genesis, chapter 45, verse 28. And it says, "And Israel said, 'It is enough. Joseph, my son, is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die.'" Remember, Israel is Jacob, Joseph's father. Okay, let's begin the story. As next in command to the Egyptian Pharaoh, Joseph had a very important job. He had told the king that there would be 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine, and it was his duty to buy food and store it for the years of famine. Great storehouses were built and filled with grain, as he directed. Just as God had said, the years of plenty ended, and nothing would grow. Then Joseph opened his storehouses and sold the grain that he would be saving. The people of Egypt began to look at him as their savior. The famine spread to countries around Egypt, and people began coming long distances to buy grain from Joseph. Even the grazing lands of Canaan grew barren and dry, and that's where Joseph's father Jacob and Joseph's brothers lived, Canaan. Old Jacob and his 11 sons had practically no food left. Jacob called his sons in and said, "I hear that there is food in Egypt. Some powerful governor there had stored food and is selling it now," not knowing that was his own son. "Go down and buy some grain. Only leave Benjamin with me. He is my youngest, and I cannot bear to see him go." Benjamin was Joseph's full brother from his mother Rachel. Rachel only had 2 children with Jacob, and that was Joseph and Benjamin. The other children were Jacob and Leah's. In Egypt, the 10 brothers were led to Joseph to purchase grain. During the years they had been separated from their brother, he had grown from a boy to a great man, dressed in kingly robes, and they did not recognize him, but Joseph recognized them right away. However, he pretended not to know them and spoke harshly, accusing them of being spies. You can see a picture. That's Joseph in the robe, and Joseph's wife beside him, and those are his brothers at the bottom. Just as God had said, the years of plenty... Oops. Page turned on me. The 10 were dismayed at being called spies and tried to convince this mighty Lord that they were honest men trying to buy food to take back to their old father and younger brother. What news this was to Joseph, after 20 years, to find that his father Jacob was still alive, and Benjamin. Joseph began to form a plan in his mind so that he could see his precious younger brother. "You still do not convince me that you are not spies," he told them. "In order to prove that you are honest, one of you must stay here in prison while the rest go home and bring your younger brother to me." But he could hardly continue talking about this with his long-lost family, and he had to leave the room so they would not see him cry. Very worried, the brothers finally decided to let Simeon stay in Egypt while they took the grain home. Then on the way, they found the money they had paid for the grain still in the sacks, as Joseph had secretly told the workmen to leave it. They could not understand what was happening, but they were afraid that God was bringing trouble upon them because of the way they had once treated their own brother, Joseph. As much as his sons tried to persuade him, Jacob refused to take Benjamin back to Egypt. But the sacks of grain did not last forever, and again Jacob's house had no food. This time the sons, remembering the strange ruler and their brother Simeon still in prison, refused to go for more grain until Jacob gave permission for Benjamin to go also. One of the brothers, Judah, promised to take special care of Benjamin. This time the Israelite men took a number of gifts with them to Egypt. As they bowed low before Joseph again, Joseph could hardly bear to look at his younger brother without telling them who he was. But instead he asked they have dinner with him in his home. Afraid of what this meant, the men approached Joseph's house, trying to make explanations for the money they had found in their grain sacks on the last trip. Instead of receiving a scolding, they had their brother Simeon given back to them. During the dinner, Joseph tried to remain calm, and he asked about the health of their old father, and he met Benjamin. But once again he had to leave the room to keep them from seeing the tears of excitement in his eyes. This time, when they left for home, he not only had his servants put their money back in their sacks, but he also had his own silver cup placed in Benjamin's sack. After he had given them time to be on their way, he sent his servants to search them and to find the cup. The brothers told the servants over and over that none of them had stolen the cup, and when it was found in the sack, they were terrified. After they were led back to Joseph's house, they fell before Joseph, trying to explain. "Take any of us prisoner except Benjamin. If he does not return, our old father will surely die." See, Joseph wanted to see if they had really changed, or if they were still the same way. That's why he put it in Benjamin's bag, because Benjamin was only their half-brother, and he wanted to see if they would treat him the way they treated him years ago, when they sold him into slavery. But they didn't. As they told the story of the old man's love for his son, Joseph could not control himself any longer. He held out his arms to them and cried, "I am Joseph." They stared, not believing him. But when they saw that indeed it was so, that he still loved them, they began begging his forgiveness. "Do not be afraid of me, or think that the thing you did was so bad," Joseph told them. "It was God's will that I come to Egypt, so I could save you from hunger when the famine came. He had guided us all. Now go back to Canaan and bring our father here also." So Jacob and his sons packed all their belongings and gathered together all their flocks and moved to Egypt, where they could find food until the famine was over. Because he thought so much of Joseph, Pharaoh gave them a special part of the land of Goshen on which to settle. There Joseph was able to visit with his father and brothers often. Finally, old Jacob died, but because he had asked it, his sons took his body back to Canaan and buried it in the cave of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac, and Rebekah. And that's the end of tonight's story. It's the end of Joseph's story. Our next story will be about Moses, and it's called A Princess Finds a Baby. I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's story, and I hope you guys have a good night's sleep. Bye, kids. God bless.